Here today to talk about why it's time for your lab to consider upgrading to the Profusion neXus 360 lab management system. With more than 15 years of customer use and support, our neXus OMS platform has come to an end. So Peter, why don't you tell us why people need to think about this right now?
Yeah, sure, not a problem. Thanks, Tara. Bring up a comparative table. And what this is doing is comparing the older neXus LMS, sometimes I call it traditional neXus platform, with Profusion neXus 360. One of the main drivers behind needing to upgrade to the 360 platform is the end of support on the Windows Microsoft side for Windows Server 2012 R2. So Profusion neXus LMS, the older version of neXus, we support that up to Windows Server 2012 R2. But if people are transitioning to Windows Server 2016 or higher, and really they need to move across the neXus 360 platform now to ensure that it's working on the latest operating system. Profusion neXus 360 is also optimized, so designed and implemented on the Windows 10 operating system. What I now want to do is go through some of the reasons in this comparative table as to why a person on neXus LMS would be looking at upgrading to neXus 360 other than the Windows end of life that I was talking about before. These are sort of grouped in different functional aspects. So neXus 360 will talk to you in terms of security settings. So neXus 360 has fine-grained user permissions compared to the older neXus platform. The audit logs are both at the system and study level, and they're more comprehensive than what we had before. Two-factor authentication is also available in a Compumedics hosted environment. And then we look at some of the functional aspects here. So what we've been able to implement with neXus 360, things like restricting study access to specific physicians or specific groups. Digital report signing is in there in terms of the Profusion PSG sleep reports. We do have the inbuilt report wizard. PC-based acquisition remains the same, but we have optimized the neXus 360 platform for different platforms in terms of different operating systems, different computers, and different browsers. So it's a web-based platform that works on any HTML5 browser. Both platforms do retain HL7 compatibility. So if you're looking at integrating with your EMR or hospital information system, you'll of course still be able to do that with neXus 360. It's an option there. Some of the other functional stuff that we're going to go through today, things around workflow efficiency. So introducing dashboard features to help you navigate your workflow, scheduling based on both time, normal date and time, also resource-based scheduling that has drag and drop functionality in there as well. From a reporting side, so we still have the Profusion PSG report templates, of course, in there. There's better accessibility to those, but then we've got inbuilt SQL or SQL database query tools and lab reports, which is similar to Crystal Reports functionality for those who know that. There are more accessibility to editing your template. We've inbuilt support for some of the newer hardware platforms. I also just want to point out, we are skipping through quite a number of features today, but you can go into this channel, have a look at quite detailed videos on how to look at some of these functions. So for example, there's a 5-minute video on signing a digital report in Profusion. So we'll be referring to that, but you'll have that resource as well. Thanks, Tara.
That's great, Peter. Thank you so much.
Okay.
I wondered if you might be able to show us a little bit about how we might set up neXus 360. What are some of the options for us to consider?
Not a problem. So neXus 360 is available in 2 different deployment modes. The first is Compumedics hosted. That's something we were not able to offer on the older neXus platform. But then there's also customer hosting. So in this table on the right-hand side is a customer hosted feature set. Compumedics hosted, we host it in the cloud on AWS platform, and we do host those servers within the country where the client resides for compliance, for example, with HIPAA compliance in the US. The customer hosted is typically what we refer to as on-premise. So that's where the client is actually providing the infrastructure themselves. Now, we did change the terminology just recently to customer hosted instead of on-premise, because we do have some customers who have like a hybrid option where they've got some of their storage, for example, using Azure or AWS cloud storage. Okay, so it can be a bit of a hybrid scenario sometimes when the client is hosting it. There are some functional differences though between Compumedics hosting it in the cloud and customer hosting. And this table we can send to you in a PDF, but some of the main points to consider are, for example, SQL database access. So when Compumedics hosts it, we're hosting it in AWS infrastructure. The client would have no access to the actual SQL database itself. So some clients, I know some of the advanced clients are running MS Access or database scripts, and they run it off the server. So they need access to the SQL database. In that instance, you would need to have a customer hosted environment where you can access the infrastructure. In terms of the legacy data from your older Nexus LMS platform, this does need discussion with each client because it changes depending on each client's scenario, and we need to go and have a discussion with people about that. We can transfer the data all across to a Compumedics hosted environment, but it depends on how much data you've got. In a customer hosted environment, it's a little bit easier for us to build over the top of your existing platform, and we just need to discuss, how much data people have and what they really want. In terms of Active Directory, so Active Directory, for those who don't know, in a hospital setting, you'll often go in and the IT functions are centralized. So for example, if I went in to a hospital to work, the IT would give me a username and password, and they would control my access, whether it's on or off. And they would also control applications I have access to. So it's just a centralized management system. Okay, now, if the clients want us to integrate Nexus 360 with the Active Directory so that they can give clients or users access or terminate their access centrally, that Active Directory support is not supported in the Compumedics hosted environment. We would need to recommend that you have a customer hosted on-premise environment. Another benefit of the on-premise is local PSG review. So if you wanted to have the Profusion PSG or Profusion EEG software on a client machine and run the actual software on a traditional reader station, you can do that in an on-premise environment on a computer within your network, but not when Compumedics is hosting it on our infrastructure. Access to Microsoft Word-based reports. There are some clients, it's not often, but there are some clients that have Microsoft Word scripts embedded within their Profusion reports. We do not use Microsoft Word in the Compumedics hosted environment for licensing reasons. If you wanted to use Microsoft Word, you would use customer hosted environment, but we do have an editor that works ourselves. It's just not Microsoft Word. How we deploy Profusion in the web browser differs between the two modes. We use different technologies when we're hosting it, but in a customer hosted environment, we can integrate with your existing Citrix farm. So Citrix changed quite significantly about 2 years ago in terms of their support for audio and video. So if you're a hospital that has a Citrix environment and you want to use that to publish Profusion, we can do that with Nexus 360. That will also give you differences in review speed. One thing to just bear in mind is if you have a program, for example, for Profusion EEG sitting on a local computer, and that's where the data resides, of course, that's the fastest way to review that information. When we're then publishing it through a web browser, so you have increased remote accessibility, you do get affected with review speed. So it depends. If I have people doing long-term EEG studies, a lot of data, they want really high review speed, I would recommend a customer hosted environment, so they're accessing the data where it's stored because it's quicker. In the sleep world, it doesn't really matter as much because we're spending more time on each page and scrolling through. terms of the infrastructure, storage, servers, and load balancers, smaller labs that do not have the IT infrastructure, that's where they'll come to us and want us to host it for them. If you do a customized version, then of course, this is where it's more in the traditional sense. The hospital will look after the storage, servers, the backups and redundancies, etc. Nexus 360 being a subscription model in either deployment mode, so whether we host it or whether you do, includes all of your upgrades to Profusion, Nexus 360 as well. Server deployment, it varies, okay? If we're hosting everything and we control it, we can set it up quite quickly. Just in a customer hosted environment where we work in a hospital setting, we need to work with your IT department, okay? So we need to wait until we've got the infrastructure set up before we can obviously then go and deploy it. Okay, so this is an overview of the Compumedics hosted environment. So the setup, the acquisition side of things all remains pretty much the same. So we have the Grails, the cameras, all running through a switch powered over Ethernet to an acquisition PC and recording on that local PC. So if the network goes down, you're still recording, you won't lose any data. What we're doing is pushing all that information through the firewall over port 443, which is a secure internet traffic port, always open. Basically, your internet runs through that. So in the Compumedics hosted environment, so we're managing everything here from the servers, the storage, and the backup side of things. It might be if you have HL7 implemented to talk to your EMR, we will need to put a little server running within your network for the communication side of that. But otherwise, the remote access is through standard internet port 443. It's my hosted version. So the acquisition side of things remains the same, running through the switch, but of course, all of the servers, the storage, the HL7, etc., is all managed by your IT, the hospital IT, sitting behind the firewall. One of the differences in terms of implementation between 360 and the older LMS platform, Nexus 360, we typically have 1 or 3 ports open. We actually use 1 as the main port, port 443, and we have a couple of ports open for remote access and monitoring. The older Nexus LMS platform, to go and install that, we might have had to have, tens of thousands of ports open in the firewall. So installation was also a little bit tricky and working with your IT security.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to learn about some of the highlights of Nexus 360 today. So let's get into that.
Not a problem. Okay, so what we're going to do here, I'm actually logging into a cloud server. For those of you who can't tell by my accent, I am Australian. So I'm sitting in Sydney, Australia. I'm actually accessing a server that's in the US, actually. I'm going to log in with an administrative access. So I can basically do everything with this, probably even a bit more than your typical lab manager would be able to do. The two-factor authentication that I spoke about earlier is enabled in this cloud environment, Compumedics hosted. So I've just got that number sent to my phone and I've typed it in there as an extra security. When we first log in, we have these user dashboards. And just a reminder, there are videos on the YouTube channel that explain this in greater detail. So when I'm a user, I log in, I've got these dashboards and they're all about navigating workflow. We weren't able to have these sorts of features in Nexus LMS, but now that it's web-based, we can provide these sorts of tools. And it's all about increasing your lab efficiency as you're working. If I just go up here onto the view button and we can have a look, I can change the layouts. Each user will change it depending on what suits them the best in their role. But I can also then look at a bunch of tools that are available to me. So as a lab manager, I might look at current user sessions, disk space, particularly if it's hosted by the hospital. You want to keep an eye on that so you can liaise with your IT if storage is running low. User logins and so forth. Some of the widgets that are more common for the physicians will be, they want to look just at the reports that they need to sign. They want to have a look at studies that are triggered just for them. If I have a quick look here, I've got a list of studies here and I can go into the settings. One of the settings there is actually a filter by lab physician. So I can go in there and just choose my own name, for example, Philip Henderson, and just see the studies that are available for me. So it helps me navigate that workflow. So that's a dashboard feature in terms of navigating quickly through the system. I just wanted to point out here, up in the top right-hand corner, we have our user profile. Each user, when they go in, they'll upload or set up their dashboards, but they'll also upload a digital signature. Typically, of course, this is the physicians that will do this, because this is the signature that's used to sign the report in Profusion. And I'll show you that later. Okay, so you just want to make sure that you edit your profile when you first log in and upload a digital signature. Then moving ahead, what we're looking at is going into the patient level of the database. Two levels of the database, if you like. There's a patient level and a study level. So if I go in here, and I can actually, I've got a filter on here, but I've got a whole bunch of patients in the system here. I'll just filter by a URN, and we're just going to click on this little orange cursor to go into the database. Now here, this is where our demographics are stored, and a lot of this has been retained. It's quite similar to the old Nexus platform. So those users currently on the older platform, you'll see that the database, the actual fields in the database, fairly consistent, because we wanted to retain that structure and just put it in an easier interface. So here, when we're going through, we just navigate through the tab. We've got notes here, for example, that are generic notes at the patient level, you know, if they've got allergies, anaphylaxis, what have you. And we can see all the studies recorded against this patient. But then also, you've got a section that's the document section. Now, this is at the patient level. We have another one at the studies level that I'll show you. So if you're looking to move to a paperless environment, you can actually scan the documents and upload them to the database simply by clicking on Add Document over here. So for example, if I had I don't know, it might be a photo of the patient that I've seen. So some people like to upload photos. Some people like to upload a photo of their insurance card and just store it at the patient level. And it just means that they don't have to have all these bits of paper lying around. We then got the study level of the database. Okay, so here's a bunch of studies that I've got. This is how I navigate it. And once again, I can go in here and filter for a particular study. Just quickly before I do that, we might talk about the scheduler before I jump on the study level too much. Under the Appointments tab, there's a scheduler, and you can look at scheduling based on, you know, your traditional date and time, so the calendar view, or you can actually do it based on a resource, and that resource is typically rooms or devices. So for example, if people are using our Somte PSG home sleep devices, they might want to set up a calendar that shows, you know, device 1, device 2, device 3, and schedule the availability based on device. A lot of smaller clients who do not have other scheduling systems, they will use this inbuilt scheduler, which is a bit more improved than what it was in Nexus LMS. In Nexus LMS, the older Nexus, not a lot of people use the scheduler, and it was an additional add-on. So we've incorporated it here so that it's there by standard. And if I just have a look at one particular month, you can see here that in the scheduler, I can color code and define the service types and the sites. And then I can trade this calendar to show everything, or I could look for a particular service type. So I might want to look at my home sleep test. I'm currently looking at across all my sites, but I can set up various sites in here and just look at a specific calendar for that location. So a multi-site hospital that had sites A, B, and C, you could look at the different calendars individually if you like. In here, there's also the ability, I won't go in and show too much, but there's the ability to add a prepared study. So there are some clients there, for example, who are using other devices that do not record to Profusion. So for example, the WatchPat, and the WatchPat device does not support EDF import. So you can't actually get the data out of it and bring it into Profusion. But if they're using a device that they can't get the data in Profusion, they still want the study to show up in the database because they want to use 360 to centralize the management. So in that case, what we've added is a prepared study. So I could go in there and say, hey, I've got a study coming up for this patient. There won't be any perfusion data, but it will just put a study record in there so that later on I could upload the PDF report, if I like, from that third-party device. Okay. There's also a waiting list functionality in the calendar here. So this is where I'm viewing all the calendar entries from January 2019. If I go back and have a look at my waiting list, what this will do is here it's showing me the calendar, but on the left I have a bunch of people who are on a waiting list to try and get in for some study. So it supports drag and drop functionality. I can simply bring across that patient to a blank day, and then it will open up and allow me to start scheduling the patient for that day. Okay. Just a word on that though, in bigger environments where you've got a third-party scheduler, maybe part of your EMR system, what we do on the HL7 side is we can integrate with that system so that the patient demographics, the scheduling information comes across, is in Nexus 360, which makes your workflow more efficient. There's no double handling of data. We just do that via the HL7 integration. All right, so I've got a bunch of studies here. Okay, I've got some that are in Profusion PSG. I've got some Profusion EEG. So the blue is our PSG sleep software, and the purple is our EEG software, Profusion EEG. What I'm going to do here is just filter it to have a look at a particular study that I'm of interest. Okay. I've also got filters up the top though. Okay, so I could look at date or a service type, particular service type, status, etc. This is a nice one here, the lab physician. So you could set these filters and the software will remember these. So here, if I'm looking at this study, I found my study. If I go and click on the patient, that brings me back to the patient record we were looking at before. If I click on the service details, this is that second level of the database, the study level. Some of the differences here, I'll point out to compare it to the older Nexus platform. What we've done here is we've retained as many of the database fields as we have previously in Nexus, but we've just added features. So if I go down here at the study level, this is where I tag the site. So I'm recording, for example, to hospital site A. I'm tagging it to a specific physician, and I've also got the ability to tag a referring physician. So this tagging controls the security. Tagging means that I can control who sees the study. If we go through the tabs, there's a lot of stuff in here in terms of most of it's come across from the old Nexus. So we can track, what device are they on for treatment, what medication are they on, their Epworth sleepiness scale, etc. There is a difference here in staff roles. In the older Nexus platform, there weren't a lot of people being able to easily task or tag, I should say, who did what within the study. So we changed that based on customer feedback. Now what I can do is, based on roles within Nexus 360, I can then tag who is a lab physician. It's Philip Henderson. I tag it from that group against this study. Same thing, I could have referring physicians, scoring text. I've got our reports in here, and I'll show that in a bit more detail in a second. Once again, the Documents tab. This is a little bit messy here. You, in a real-life scenario, you would not have as many reports as what I have here. This is our demo site. This is where they're all stored. So when a perfusion report is signed, it will be here. And over on the right-hand side, we've got the status column. So we can see that I've got some reports that I've signed for this patient, or this study, I should say, some that are unsigned as yet. Similar to the patient tab, what we've also got for those who want to have a truly paperless environment is the ability to add documents. So you might want to have, let's say you had a paper-based referral system, you want to scan the referral for that particular study, upload it and keep it in the database. You can do that here. So you can do that adding of a journal document at either the patient or the study level. Another feature that people asked us for to implement with 360 was the ability to add letters. So what this is, when I generate a report in Profusion, for example, a sleep report, it will save it to that tab. But what people also wanted to do was have other sort of templates, not just a physician's report, but other templates, which might be a phone questionnaire, it might be a physician order template for a CPAP, for example. So they wanted the ability to design these letter templates, and then when they run them, it populates the data from the database. If I just selected one of these and ran it, it will populate, store against a customer record, and then I can just print it off if I need to. Okay.
I mentioned that I wanted to have you come and show us how we can assign groups.
Some people think, okay, I'm going to a web-based or computer-based environment, it's less secure. I personally think it's a lot more secure. You think of your internet banking, everyone does their banking on the internet nowadays. So there's a lot more in terms of, you know, we can track what people are doing. The old paper record would have been sitting on the doctor's desk, but now we can track everything. It's all tagged and we have that security. But the way Nexus 360 works in terms of setting up user access, if we go into security here, we do it by groups. So what I do here, and this was a lot of requests that we had coming in, which was a limitation of the older Nexus platform. So the older Nexus users, really, you sort of had two groups. You had one that had all the access and administrator access, and then one that had reduced access. The feedback we got was people wanted to be able to set up their own groups and control what people could do. So this being my demo site, I've got a whole bunch of different groups here that I've set up. The lab managers is simple. We'll start with that. So if I click on the permissions here, you can see there's a lot more control in what a group can do. So the lab manager group, for example, would often be able to do most things. I can also click show in roles, and that's where on that study level where I tag users, who was a lab physician, who was a scoring tech. That's how I enable that. Okay, so if I tick show in roles, then it will give me a group of lab managers and I can choose the most appropriate one to tag against the study. So these are quite simple. All I need to do, if I've got an incorrect setting, I can just tick it or untick it and update that particular group setting. So there's a lot more control there, which gives you a lot more security as well. And then if I want to have a look at who's in a particular group, I just click on these users. All right, this will give me a list of users that have been assigned to that group, and I can just tick and add another one from my user list if I want. So in terms of setting up users, your lab manager will have full control. They don't need to talk to Compumedics. You just go in and set up a user and add them to the appropriate group. But now that we've set up groups and users, one of the main things that we implemented with Nexus 360 was the ability to control who sees a study. So typically, a lot of people will see the patient database because everyone needs to access at least a patient level. But at the study level, you want to start restricting who can see that. So if I go into a study access rules here, I will access the Compumedics USA one. So usually you would not have as many rules set up. You only have a few in a live deployment. But this is where I've said, okay, I've got a group called Compumedics USA. I've defined what permissions that group can have. And now I'm defining what they can actually see. So based on service and site, so here I'm saying the Compumedics USA group can see a consultation, the EEG studies, provided they've been recorded to the site called Compumedics USA. And so now what happens is when I do an acquisition for a study, when I start the acquisition, it will say what service type is it? I'll say EEG, for example. They'll say what site am I recording the study to? Compumedics USA. And when I start the acquisition, that then complies with these rules. So anyone who's in or defined under the study access rule will now be able to see the study. Of course, anyone who's outside of this can't see that study. So you get a lot of more security there, but it does depend on how you set up your system. So there's more comprehensive audit trails, if you like, in Nexus 360 compared to what you had in the older platform of Nexus LMS. What we're doing here is we're just looking at what Tara's been doing. So here, this is a searchable but non-editable. Okay, you don't want to be editing an audit trail. So I can go in here and say, hey, when did Tara last log on? So for example, if we're logging in here, we can see who's been on the system and where they've accessed it from, what browser, etc. So it gives you that control and that extra level of security to see who's been on the system and so forth. We then also have that at the space level, which you wouldn't have had in the older Nexus platform to the same degree. So here I can go through and say, hey, let's have a look at a particular study, and I want to see what Tara's done to this study. So when did she access it? Was she accessing it through Profusion, or was she only in the Nexus 360 side of things? What was she doing to some degree? So if Tara was a physician and she was signing the report, it would say, here, the report's been signed. So I'd be able to track all this at the study level. So if you ever had a question about who accessed the study or what happened, when did they sign it, you have an easy way to access that information here.
So I was wondering if you might be able to show our attendees how a lab manager might track service that's been provided for regulatory reporting.
Yeah, sure. So in terms of reporting the information out, so now we've got all that information in the database. Basically what I can do is I've got two search options or query options. So the dashboards here to quickly look at, this is about navigating your day-to-day workflow, but then I've also got 360 search. For those older Nexus users, this is the equivalent of your study finder. So a lot of people want to go in, they want to search the SQL database and pull the information out. This is a nice user interface where you can just select the entity of interest, bring it across, and then add conditions if I want. So for example, I might want to look at patients who have a date of birth within a particular range. All I need to do is hit execute. I'll preview the data down here, and then I can export it to Excel. So a lot of people are using this more for where they have the research side of things and they want to get that information out into Excel. But I have people using this also for clinical reporting that they do on a regular, weekly basis. So all they do is build these reports, save them with the blue buttons up here, and then load them each time to run those reports. There is a second, more comprehensive management tool that's in there though, and I just want to show you the back end. So if I go into the templates and lab report templates here, so what I've done, we've got some canned reports, but we provide this tool so that you can design your own reports. So in the older system, you would have had to have maybe MS Access or Crystal reports to run SQL reports, and you would have had to pay additional for that software. We've built it in so that you can start designing them yourselves. So anyone with MS Access SQL database reporting skills will be able to go in and build these. We define the layout, we define the fields that we want to populate, and then go into the lab report. I just want to click on it and run that report. What it will do is run that report in a nice PDF in this instance. I'll have date times up here that I can choose date ranges. And this is just showing in my database the study count that I've got by various sites and service types. So it's a nice way to look at it at a click of a button, but you have the ability to build your own reports. Here to the studies level. Now what I'm doing to access a Profusion bank, okay, and what it's doing is launching Profusion PSG in the web browser. So I don't have it located on my computer. We can score, etc., go through the record. We can page through the record with video and audio. Once that's been done, once we've scored the results, so the scoring takes the scored online, and just generate a report, I can also then do a spell check. So we've built in a spell check here at the reporting level for the physicians. And then we simply sign the report. And this report, once it's signed, it's encrypted and it will be a saved, signed, secure PDF that's available in the Documents tab at the study level. Once again, there's a YouTube video that shows you how to do this step by step. So I just wanted to talk about some of the advanced workflow efficiency features that we've got. And it leads in from here quite well. So let's say I'm closing my study down. When I close it down, the ability to change the state. So this is currently in scoring. I could say it's scored, etc. I change it depending on where we are in the workflow with this patient. Over here, see, we've got patients or studies in different status types, or so scheduled studies, scoring versus scored versus available, reporting, reported. Because we're tracking that status, now what we can do is automate some of those manual tasks that people might have had in the past. We do this by going into workflow settings. Okay, what I might want to do here, for example, well, we've got a lot of clients who want to delete video. Let's say I'll just choose a time period, let's say 90 days. Okay. So what I'm doing, this is quite a manual task that people are maybe spending 1 day a month and manually going through and doing this. But what we're doing, because it's a repetitive task and it triggers off the study state, I can actually go in here and say, okay, what are we doing? We're deleting video. Sorry, I did it in the wrong order. So what I want to do is delete video 90 days after completed. So the task that I'm choosing is deletion of video. When the study status is complete is when it will trigger this workflow. And I could do it for all sites or choose a specific one like I've done here, all access, the specific service types. I've got ambulatory PSG. And for the delay, I can just say 90 days. So what happens is when someone goes into Profusion and now clicks, hey, this study is completed, the software will run through 90 days after it's been completed, automatically delete the video. I can do this for other things such as archiving of studies. So I might want to archive a study. Okay, and let's just say, I don't know, 120 days. Okay. Okay, and this, once again, I've seen other labs where they sit there and have to do this quite manually, so it takes up a lot of staff time. So here we're just archiving study once it's been completed, so we're triggering off that. Again, I can have all sites, or I can choose a particular service type. Here, I'll put in the 120 just to match my rule, and what it will do is say, okay, where's the archive device located? Okay. So another way I can automatically delete video, I can automatically archive studies to an external device even if I needed to. The other thing is I could send emails. So you might have physicians that constantly read patients, so they'll be in the system and navigating it no problem. You might also have physicians that only read 1 or 2 patients a week and they don't want to sit in the system and wait for something to happen. So you could set it up to notify a physician when a study has been tagged to them and they need to report it. You could also set up to-do items. So for example, you might say, I want to set up a to-do item that once a study has been reported, 30 days after that, I want my lab secretary group to send a follow-up letter. So it will automatically then populate a to-do item on that person's computer that, hey, you need to schedule a follow-up with this patient. So that's a very quick way that we've gone through. Once again, Tara, there's a YouTube video on this that goes into more detail, but it basically introduces some of the workflow lab efficiencies that Nexus 360 will provide that we weren't able to provide in Nexus LMS, the older Nexus.
Absolutely. I appreciate that, Peter. I think it's pretty evident that Compumedics has done a great job in listening to the requests of users